Hello and welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make this 2D technical detail once your 3Ds are done. So in principle, it's very easy to make 2D drawing once your 3D is ready. But because this is the first time we are doing it, we need to do some page setup. We need to learn about setting our title block, putting a logo on it, putting some variables. And then we learn about sectioning properties, dimension properties, line weights, and that's all we are going to learn in this video. So let us quickly go to our plot menu, and that is on your horizontal bar and also on your vertical bar with the name as plotting and a printer icon on it. So the moment I click on it, I am brought to a page which is set at A4, and I can see exactly the way it was on my viewport. So the cabinet is what I see here. And let's say if I go to plot menu, I can say that I want to delete this sheet. Okay, so I will be brought back to my viewport, and I can now say I don't want to see material, I don't want to see the shadings, and I go to the plot menu again, and that's what I get now. I see some edges here which are not good enough. I go back, and this time I'm gonna go to tools 2, and I'm gonna say that edge visibility will be only outlines. So this makes our page look much cleaner in case I have some files with dense geometry on it. So I say that the angle for smoothing should be 40. So if you see on the left hand side, the moment I click on only outlines visible, it is asking me for the angle for smoothing, and I would say 40 is good. So you see the glass has only the outlines. So now when I go to my page, it looks much cleaner. So that is something you can do before you start making further sectioning and stuff. Let's learn about setting up the page now. That was the first thing I wanted to show you, how your drawing looks on paper. And now we are going to change the paper itself. So it's A4. Let us hop on to the page setup. And here, if you see, there are two different page setup. One is default, one is individual. So when I say individual, it means I'm going to change the very same page which is visible on my screen, and not the other pages which I'm gonna make in future. That's what an individual setting is about in Python. And if I want to change the complete page setup of my system for the drawings I'm gonna make henceforth, I will go and change my default page setup. So I'm gonna do individual for now because we will see the changes live whatever I do here. Okay, and I bring it to the right hand side. So first thing it's asking is about the name of the sheet what I want. So you can just put your page or maybe ABC, whatever things you want. It's just gonna be showing here on the top bar. Okay, and the second thing, it's asking for the plotter. For now I'm gonna say Adobe PDF. That's what is coming from my Windows software what I have on my PC. If you have a different PDF reader, it would show up here. Okay, or maybe you can select your printer. But for now, I'm gonna say Adobe PDF, and it's gonna bring some formats out of my plotter here. So it's not coming from Python actually, it's coming from the plotter what I have selected. So you may have a different kind of printer and you might see some different options here. So let's go and select A3 from here, and all of a sudden my page is bigger. Now I can just say portrait or landscape, and I can say that I want to see the frames, or I want to turn it off from here. Okay, so for now I would stick with no frames, I would stick with no marks. So these are the page full marks which you see here. So once I say no marks, they are gone. And I can say no project path. So let me just zoom in again to the bottom left, and when I say off, I don't see project path, I don't see the dates, and that's it. So I am gonna say this page setup is perfect for me, and I will click OK. So the setting what I did was the individual setting. If I'm coming to the second page, it's still there. So what I have to do is go to the default page setup from the right hand side, and I'm gonna do all those settings again. So I'll say from here Adobe PDF, and I'm gonna say the option for the format will be A3, and this should be landscape, no frames, no marks, no dates, no paths, and that's it. So this is the default page what I like, and it's asking here that if you want to load some title block automatic. Okay, I can choose to load a standard title block. Let us see how it looks. I say okay, and when I load under the sheet, I'm getting a standard title block. So that's very old school. I would be making my own title block, and we're going to learn it together. So I go to default settings again, and this time I am gonna say that I don't want to load the default title block, and I say okay. So this is how our page is as of now. It's completely empty, and why I'm doing it empty is because I'm gonna do my own borders and own title block, and we will load it as default. So to start that, I'm gonna go to main menu, and I will just say file new. Okay, so I will just open a new file, and I go in my top view. So that's how we'll be drawing our title block. Okay, from the top view always, and not in front or sides. And make sure that your scale in the bottom is 1:1. Okay, we will learn more about this when we bring in our actual 3D object and we put some dimensions or text on it. So for now, just make sure that it's always 1:1. And to make the title block, I would go to one of my 2D element, which is edges, or maybe I can go with faces too. But I would prefer edges here. And I'm just going to draw a rectangle. So when I draw the rectangle, the size should be that of A3 paper. And let me just go back to the page and see what size it is. So I go to default setting, and it's showing as 420 by 297. Okay, so I'm gonna do the same size, and I go to main menu again. I say edges, I would say rectangle, and I would draw from this area. Okay, and the sizes, when it's asking on my input bar, I would say 420 in X, and I'm gonna say 297 in Y. So that's how my page is. I press X on my keyboard to center my drawing on the viewport. And now let us put a margin in it. For the margin, I'm gonna go to Edge menu again, and here I will select parallels. I will select one of the edge, and I say enter with my middle mouse button. So if I bring my mouse outside of the box, I'm gonna make a parallel edge outside. I would rather make it inside, and I would type distance as 5. And I say okay with the enter button. So now I have my page outline done here. So now let us save this thing and quickly check how it's gonna look when I load it on my plotter. So I would say save as on my desktop, and I will name this thing as title block. So let's go to the page again, and I would say that I'm going to go to default. In here, I would say I want to load a title block automatically, but this should be user defined. I'm going to browse this thing, go to my desktop and select this. So I click OK. Now to check it, I'm gonna load another page, and you will see there is some alignment issue where my title block is running to the left hand side and to the top as well with 5 mm. And to correct this, what I'm going to do is just delete the outer border. Okay, and I'm gonna align this thing to my origin. So I will press Ctrl S. I come back to the plotter again, and now let us check here. So whilst loading the third page, I can see it's perfect now. So always do this, just align your inner area to the origin and you have to delete the outer border. And now let us make some space below to put information about the project, customer, designer, and maybe a company logo on the right hand side. So I am gonna extend it from bottom with the space of 32, so I can make a block of 30 below for the information. And for that I'm gonna make another rectangle from this point to the origin, and let us just double click this and bring it down by 2 mm. So I will make it 30 but all the way to the bottom, so all the 2 mm is adjusted here. And I would also need some area for my logo, and for that I need to make a face here. So I'm gonna extend this thing and I'm gonna extend it by 3 times bigger than the height, so let us make it 92. Yeah, so I will go in my face and I'm gonna make a rectangle here from this point up until this point here. So I will also reduce this thing in my height and I make it 30. Again, all the adjustment in the bottom, and this 90. This adjustment I make it to the left. Yeah, so I need a face to put a logo because I can't do that on the rectangle. As you can see, there is no shading, and the face has to have the good side at the top. Okay, in case your face is having your good side in the bottom, like you can see the shading here, so you have to invert it. Okay, and you make sure that the white shading is always on the top. And now let us find the logo which is good for this aspect ratio. The aspect ratio is 1:3, so the width is 3 times bigger than that of the height. And I will just go to the company website and download one of the logo. So I go to pytha.de and I will right click here, save the image on my computer in pictures, and I'm gonna take help of an application to make the correct size of my logo. So I start new paint and I'll go to the canvas, and here I'm gonna say that the height is 300 and the width is 900. Okay, so the height is jumping back to 453, so I'm gonna just say don't lock my aspect ratio and resize my canvas. So this is the area I want my image to be. So I'm gonna go to insert that image what we downloaded. Okay, and it is sitting perfectly in this area. I just click outside, so we have the correct width and the height. Just make sure that your image is having a white background and it's not transparent. That's important. So I'm gonna save this thing and I will say this is my title block logo, and it will sit in my pictures folder. Okay, now once we have the right image for the logo, I'm gonna jump back to my title block page and I will create a new material from this material menu. And we have already learned about this material settings while we made this rendering of the cabinet. So let us quickly create the material file, and I say new mat file. The mat file will be on my desktop for now, but you can save it in your desired area, and I would just make it title block. Okay, and here I'm gonna go to browse and select the image from my desktop. Okay, I don't have to do any other settings. I would just say company logo and I say okay. I quit this and now I say assign the material on this area, and I would select the file what I just made. So I go to browse and I go to desktop and I say title block and I click on it. So we have the logo here which is inverted. So reference points can be defined automatic for this, and once it has a reference point, now I can just mirror or rotate the reference points to fix the texture issues. So I go to attributes, reference points, and I say modify the reference point on this face, and I say just mirror it and it's fixed. You can just rotate and fix it in case it is rotated as well, and I say okay. So the idea is to have the correct aspect ratio and your logo looks nice fit on this title block. Now we will make some borders inside this area so that we have some space for putting text and variables, and for that I'm gonna just right click on this and I'll say edit. Whilst I'm in edit mode, make sure that you select the right number of segments you want in the length. So for now I would say that I need 3 sections here for all the information, and also around 4 segments, so I will have around 4 sections here. I click on OK, and now we will put some text inside. So for that you have to go to the horizontal ribbon here and you click on the text, and I say I want a horizontal text here. So I can select this point and make my text window up until here. The moment I make the second click, I get this enter text dialog. So here I can say that I want project name, and I put a colon and I put a question mark, and now I say okay. So I will explain you why I put a question mark here, but before that I'm gonna align this box properly. So I can just align it in height at the center, and in the width I can just put an offset of 2 mm. But make sure that you edit the text frame and keep it inside, so in case if the names are bigger you don't mess up with the formatting. Okay, perfect. And now I'm gonna say Control S and I will come back to my plotter menu and I add a new page, so you have this title block set here. Now why I did put a question mark, because you can right click on the question mark, say edit text, and there will be this text input dialog, and whatever I enter in this I'm gonna just replace the question mark and not the label of project name. So that's what the question mark does. It allows me to edit. But imagine you have multiple pages, you will have to do the change on this question mark on all the pages again and again. It's handy when you have some information which is page specific, so you can put a question mark and you can change it on the specific pages you want, but not good if you have multiple pages and the information is same. So let us first clean up all these sheets what we created for the test purpose. So I'm going to say delete and delete all. Okay, so we don't have any of the sheet. And now I would say that this question mark is useless for me, so I'm going to edit this thing, and instead of question mark I would rather want here some variable which I can change it on the go. So let us put a variable here. Now to put any variable you have to always make use of the $sign, and let us just put V for variable. Okay, now this is not gonna work because I have to set up somewhere in my system, and I have to set up an area that what this V means, or where I can edit the V. So for that you go to environment on the ribbon bar, which is the horizontal ribbon bar, and here you will see a dialog called as edit variables. So I go on edit variables and I say I want to make a new variable which is named as V. The value I would just say inverted comma, open and close it. So now if I put any text in between, let's say project name is Pytha training, and I say okay. So you have Pytha training here. So the idea is, if you save a file with a variable inside, and I would say Control S, go to the plotter menu again, and let's say I open multiple sheets, so the title block is loaded automatically, and at any point of time I can say edit variables. I would say instead of Pytha training, I want this thing to be something else, Pytha beginners tutorial. So at the OK button, I have the changes done on all of my sheets. Okay. Now remember, when you are making variables and you start a new Pytha window for maybe a new project, you will lose all of your variables there. So let us see how to fix that. I'm coming on the new Pytha window, and I'm gonna go to the plot menu, and here I will see that the variable is $V. I go to the environment, I say edit variables, and there is nothing on my variable list. So I will have to create it here, and I will have to add things manually again and again for each project. Okay, so it will work, but not easy. So to fix this, what I'm gonna do is I will close this window, and I'm gonna go to environment. I will say edit variables, and here I will say save this file somewhere on my PC, or I would just say make it default. So if you save it on the new project, you can just open it, so you don't have to make the big list of variables you created, or else you can just say make default. So next time when you open Pytha, you will have this variable included with the project. So that was one of the way to get the information with the help of variables, but there is another way which I would prefer, because there is a dedicated Pytha project header menu here, and here you can make the information at once, and you can call this information with the help of $sign again in your title block. So we will learn about this. I'm gonna right click this, and I will say edit, and this time I would say I just want to insert a variable from my project header. So I would say I want to insert $1. Okay, now this means if I am filling any data here, it's gonna show up in my title block. Okay, now if you see closely, it is saying that this area is represented by $1, and the labels are represented by $line. Okay, so if I have to call this line, I would say $1 for my labels, and for the information I would say single $1. Okay, now let's do this. I'm gonna just say edit, and here I would say that instead of project name, I would say $line1. Okay, and now you see I'm getting the label here as project. So this is the best way to put the information here, because we have a dedicated window of project header, but you can make use of variable as well. I will explain you about the use of variable in some other example. So let us just right click on this and make a copy in your length for the second dialog. Okay, so I'm going to copy it here, and I will make 2 copies in horizontal. I go to text and I say copy all of this at once, and from this point to this point. In vertical, I would say make 3 copies. Okay, why I made a copy? Because you can just say edit, and you can make your own title block very quickly. So you just have to say that I want line number 2 here. Okay, so I have the customer details here. You can say I want to have line number 3 here, and so on. So I'm gonna just stop it here, and rest of the lines you can change the way you want. Okay, I would like to add some more information on it. It is that, let's say if you don't like some of these labels, like fax. I don't know who is using fax in 2022. So maybe you can change some of this. Maybe you can put one line for address and you can just get rid of street, zip code and city. Okay. And for that, what you can do is just change this thing from your Python setting files. So to do that, I will start my Python central menu and I go in extras. I say I want to do edit model setting files. But before that, what I'm going to do is just say Control S. So I'm going to save it. And now I go to the folder which has all my setting files. And here you see there is a file called as Python header underscore english.txt. So you double click this and I would say instead of street, I would want your designer, and instead of zip code, I would say I would need your approved by, and instead of city, I would say I want your address. So I would have one straight line to put all the address, and I don't need a phone number. Maybe I can just say pages here. Now, why I'm doing pages, I will explain you this. What else do you need? Maybe you can put a scale here. So you can just change the scale on all of the pages in one go. And if you want the scale to be different on different pages, then you know that you can use always question mark as a variable. So I say, okay. Now before saving, make sure that you have no Python window open. So now let's save this file and I'm going to start the new model window here. And now we can see the change. So we go to project header, you will see that you have your new labels here. But remember, if you go to your title block file, your labels might not change here. The reason because your project is saved with all the information in the header as well. So what we can do is we just go to the new window what we opened and where we saw the change of all the labels, and we go to files and then we click on import. So when you import any project, then the properties are being not retained because you are importing into the new file. So I say project and I click on my title block file. So now I have the information which is not coming from this title block, but it is being set from the new file we saved. Okay, and now I'm gonna say Control S again to save it. So what you're gonna do is quickly change all these lines whatever you want, delete some of it and maybe make some space to put the terms and condition and copyright statement. So I'm gonna just go to text and I would say delete, and I'm gonna delete these two text, and I just want to make these two columns into one. So I go to H tools and I say delete this H. Okay. Now there is one more important variable I would like to show you guys, and that's the page number. So if you see in the project header, the page number is in the line number 8, and I can call this as a variable somewhere in my information. So I would say edit this and let us make this thing as $line 8 and this thing as $line 8. Okay. So if I say here that my project has total page of 20, this information will be passed on to each page, but this is not gonna serve my purpose. Okay, it's not coming here because I have to save it and I come back. So what I mean is this is not gonna serve the purpose because it is just showing the total number of page. The information I want here is page 1 of 20, page 2 of 20. Okay, and for that you just edit this and there is a code which you have to put here. So that code is 0 dollar and I say NO for number. Okay, so I'm gonna say page number 1 of 20, page number 2 of 20, and this code I'm gonna put in the description as well, so you don't have to note it down, just copy paste it. And now when I come in the page, okay, sorry, I just forgot to save it, so I press Ctrl S. And now let us go to the plotter menu again, and here I'll say new sheet. So this time I'm getting an information, this is page 8 of 20. If I say new sheet again, this is page 9 of 20. I'll clear up all this mess again by delete function, and I say delete all. So we are back here. Now I'll put some disclaimer below. So I would just copy this and I say copy from this area to this area in vertical. Edit this thing, and I'm gonna just say disclaimer, and here I will type in something. Okay, I'm too lazy to type, so I will use a Windows function which is speech to text. I will press Windows key with H. Any illegal reproduction of this design will result into immediate legal action. Okay, that was too harsh. So I click on OK. So this was just an example text, and now what I'm going to do is pause this video and change all of this dollar lines to the one what I want, and I will attach this in the description below. So this is the information what I selected, and I'm gonna attach this title block in the description below and also the project header file. Okay, so let us save this thing. So this is where we ended our last rendering tutorial, and now we are gonna make a 2D technical detailing out of this. So to make a 2D detailing, there are two different ways. Now let us say if I have such a small project with a single individual item like a cabinet or a chair or a sofa, then I will just go with the quick way in Pytha. Okay, but if I have a more complex project, then I would prefer going with the way which is taking a long route, but it's much more handy and professional. So with this title block and the page setup, we can now move on to our cabinet. So let us jump to the cabinet file, and first thing what I'm gonna do with the cabinet is I'm gonna clean up all this thing which I don't require. So that was bought in for the rendering purpose. So I go in my front view and I say I want to delete, make sure that the groups are on, and I would just select all of this and I would say delete it. Okay. Now to make a good render, I also added some small faces here, okay, to correct the texture on the edges. So I would want to delete that as well. And to do that, I would say delete, and here I say equal thickness. So with the equal thickness, the system is asking me at the input bar to select a sample part. So I can select one of the sample part, and all of the part having the same thickness will be selected, and with the middle mouse button I delete everything. Okay, perfect. So now the cabinet is clean, but before I proceed, I would like to add all the parts to the appropriate layers. Now the layers are something which are not very important to do the project, but if you assign appropriate layer, then the file becomes much more handy at the plotter sheet. So let's assign the layer, and for that you have to go to the top ribbon bar, you have to click on the layer, and we say part to layer. And now I select each of the part which I want to put in the layer. So I would say all these part will go into the layer called as carcass. Okay, and I click on OK button. Now I can go to layer, properties, and I can say that for my carcass I want visibility to be off. So the carcass is not visible anymore. To bring it back, I say I want it to be visible. I can say, okay, I want it to be selectable and changeable as well, but you can say no selection and no changeability, so you can't select the carcass anymore. So the layers are handy even to work around with a big project, and maybe you can just turn off some of the layers and focus on the small details. I go to properties again and just bring this back to selectable and changeable. So layer, path to layer, and now I'm gonna say that I want to move all this thing to my layer called as fronts. Okay, or maybe you can say visible sides. So I'm gonna select this thing and I'm gonna say that this will go into layer called as fronts. Okay, and I say layer, part to layer, and this will go in my back. So it's up to you what name you want to give or what part you find appropriate for a particular layer. Okay, and now I can say layers properties and let's check. So I would say back invisible, that is just rotate here, and I say carcass invisible, and I say fronts invisible, and I say no hardware. So if you see this red colored circle, these are actually for the machining, which we will learn in coming tutorial. So I would say I don't want this to be visible. No 3D text, no drawer carcass. So okay, the drawer carcass layer is not correctly assigned, and you see the parts are not showing here. So it means I will have to give one more layer. Oops, I would just go to layer again and I would just turn all off. Okay, so I click on OK, and now I go to layer, part to layer, and I say both of this carcass and I assign it to the correct layer name. So I click on OK, and now I go to layer properties, I say select all, and at once I would change it all to be visible, selectable and changeable. And now I click on OK. So the file is having proper layer, it is having a proper group tree. What we want is now to just quickly go on the page, and we have this cabinet on our first page. So I can now right click on this and I can say properties. I don't want this to be with materials and shading. For the first page, I would say I would make it 5 times smaller. Now I can just right click on this and I can say edit detail and I can move it around. So to move, I will just use my mouse and left click on this detail and I can just pan around my mouse. I can also say edit detail and I can just crop it, so I can clip it. Now to crop the detail, I have to select the inner point. Okay, and if I go with the outer point, then it's gonna change the size. So inner point is gonna clip it and outer point is gonna change the size. So when I change the size, it means I'm changing the scale. So I just switch back to 5 times smaller, and now I'm gonna double click this and I can still move it. So you don't have to do right click, edit detail and then move it, but you can just double click and you can just move it and bring it to this area. Okay, I will leave some margin there, and to the right hand side what I want is the same detail, so I can right click and I can say copy detail, and here I can say insert details here. Okay, now with the details on the right hand side, I would want it to be exploded, so I say properties, explosion, and I say exploded. So now here when I explode, I see a lot of mess which I don't want, and also the file is getting clipped. So I'm gonna right click this, I say edit, and I'm gonna just change the vertical clip. I'm gonna change the horizontal clip, And I can also go to properties and say this should be 10 times smaller. Okay, so some more vertical clips, but still the file doesn't looks good. It looks quite messy because there are some holes in here. So because you have proper layers, you can go to properties and you can say that I don't want some of the things to be visible. So I can just sort it by number of parts and I say no holes. So the holes are gone, no 3D text, no hardware. And now it looks decent, but I would want it still to be little different. And for that, what I'm gonna do is I will come to the main menu and I say Control Shift C. So the command is open for copying the parts on the clipboard and the system is asking me to select the parts. I'm going to select all together and I will paste this cabinet to the separate Pytha window. So for pasting it, I would say Control Shift V. So Control Shift C is for copying it and Control Shift V is for pasting it. So this is the complete new Python window and I would just paste it to the original area. Now why I did this, because I was not quite happy with the explode function here. Now the reason is because it's exploding individual part. I want to explode it with the group. Now to do with the group, I need to do the explosion in my viewport and I can't do on the plotter with the group. So that's the reason I bought the file in the second window. Now I have selected the file with the explode command and with the middle mouse button, I can now explode it with the groups together. So it's not working correct because the group structure I see on the left hand side in the tree is not correct. There is only one group. And I would say ungroup, and here I would say that I don't want the carcass to be grouped. So this will be acting as an individual part. The fronts would be individual and the drawer systems would be individual as well. But I see there are internal groups, so I would just ungroup this. Yeah. So this means I am gonna explode it now by drawer 1, drawer 2, all the sides and fronts in the different group. Okay, so let's right click again, explode, select all of this and I say treat groups together. So now it looks quite decent and I say okay. I just pan around and I find a correct angle, or else you can just press X on the keyboard and it will reset to the default angle. You can also go to graphics and you can say that I want to change the axonometry angle. So instead of 50, I would say make it 60, and instead of 23, I would make it 15 in X. So I have changed the angle. Okay. You can also switch to the default angles if you like. And now once I have these default angles, I can now say that I want to save this file as a solid view. So I say export solid and I would save it on my desktop and I name it as solid file. Yeah. So I come back to the original file and here I'm gonna go to file and I say import the solid file and I say okay, this solid file. So what I got here is the cabinet which is exploded now. And why I made a solid file, because it's just a 2D detail and I can just bring it on my paper. So I would just move it in the X and I would name it here to keep my tree organized. Yeah. So now when I come to the print menu, I can just delete this and I can just go to the top view, bring this in my viewport, and when I'm on the plotting menu, I can right click here and I can say insert model zoom. So this is going to bring my solid file, and I would say edit the detail, and I'm gonna clip it, and I'm gonna clip it from this point. I would right click this and I can go to properties and I can change the scale from here, or I would just say edit and I would scale it by changing the size from this menu. And now I'm gonna place it in the center of the window. So this looks more organized. Now if you see the file closely, then I have some issues with the line weights. So at some part the line weight is correct, but some of the part the weight is incorrect. So the reason is I have some pen in red color and some in the blue, which is my default pen. So I can anytime go to my pen settings and I can say that the line weight I want for this will be 0.10, and for red color I would change it to 0.10, and so on. Okay, so you can have different weights, but I would prefer that I keep this, and I say okay. So now the weights are all correct. Let's go to page 2 now. So before we go with the sectioning, I would like to explain you guys that there are two different ways of making sections in Python. One is the latest and the newest function, which we can do the section on the plotter itself, and it was introduced in, I guess, version 22-23. But I prefer more using the old sectioning function, which is called as associative sectioning. So the new one is like if you have a small individual project like a cabinet or maybe a chair or a sofa, then it's good. But if you have a lengthy and a complex project, then the old function is more handy. So we will learn both of them. I would first start with the quick sectioning. And for that, I'm gonna right click on the screen and I would say insert the XY view. And it's bringing the XY from my viewport. So I'm gonna edit the detail and I'm gonna clip it. I'm gonna clip this thing. And I'm gonna right click and say properties, no shading and materials, and I would make it 10 times smaller than the original scale. So I would just move it to the top left, and now I see some of the 3D text from the top view which I don't want. So I go to layer settings, I sort the layers by the number of parts, and I would say no 3D text. Okay. And to cut the sections, now I'm gonna go to section from this top ribbon, or you can also go to sections and you can say section horizontal. And now when I say section horizontal, I see a red colored line, and the way I move my mouse, the behavior of the line is changing. So when I'm at the left hand side, I can see the backside view. So the arrow is facing backward. But the moment I move my mouse to the right hand side, I'm now positioning my arrow to the front. And if I'm bringing my arrow behind, I would see front of the cabinet. And I just clicked on my left mouse and I would drop it somewhere here with the left mouse button again. And I would say edit the detail and just move it somewhere here. So just double click and you can still move it. And the text of the section is too far, so I right click here and I say move section text, and now I double click this and I align it this way. Okay. Now when I made the sections, it's showing me some hidden edges which I don't wish to see. So I right click on this and I say section properties, and here I say I don't want to see the hidden edges. Now I see the section from the area where I chose to make it visible. Okay, so I can see this front area, and I can just say make it default. But if you see closely, then my dimensions are quite small. It's like a bit tinier. So I would just zoom in and I would change this as well. So I'm gonna go to dimensions default, and here I would say that my dimension size is 0.3. I don't know why this is so tiny in default. I would just change it to 3 mm. If I click OK, it would change right away. Okay, and so does I don't like the arrows, so I go to dimension default, and here I would say that instead of arrows I want stroke. Okay, if I click OK, then you can see the behavior. You can choose to have circle or maybe nothing here, just the lines. And the distance is as well 0.5, which is not good. So I would say I want a distance of 5 mm. And you can see that there is this distance of 5. Now, once you are done with these settings, you can now choose to make it default. So all of my further sections will be having same settings for the auto dimensions and also for the hidden edges. So I click OK, and let us put some text here. So I go to exit and I say text from the right vertical menu, and I say enter a text here. So I can put a text as top view, and I would say the height of my text will be 5. And now I will make some dimensions. So I go to dimensions and I say I want to make a horizontal dimension. So we already have the outer dimension of 400. I can now choose to make one more dimension by just picking this line and bringing my dimension here. Okay, now the dimension is again a bit tiny, so we already changed the behavior of default auto dimensioning. I would right click this and I would say properties. So it will bring me to the dimension properties of this particular dimension. So I would do the same. I make it stroke and I change it to 3 mm. So the dimension is bigger, but the line looks a bit ugly because of the distance. Even if I make it 5, it is leaving a distance of 5 mm from here. What I would want is the distance of 5 mm starting from this point, and it should be constant. So I say constant length of 5 mm. Okay, and I say make this default as well, so I don't have to change it again. I can now say okay. So this is my default setting. I can also add some subtext below. So I would right click this and I say properties. So again, it will open the dimension properties, and I can add a subtext as internal width. Okay. You can also add some leading text like W, and then you say equal to sign, or maybe a trailing text. Okay, for now I just leave it the way it is and I say okay. Now I would add one more view to it. So I would say insert a side view, and I would say insert -YZ. So I would go to properties again and I would say 10 times, no material, no shading, and I don't like this line here, so I would say hide section line. Now double click this and bring it here. I would just put a text here and I write here side view. Okay, now with the side view I see there is this line here, so this is actually coming from our solid object. So I would rather move it on this area. Now remember, because I moved it, I don't see the line here, but on the first page I have actually lost my view. So I would say delete this. I would come back here and bring it in my viewport, and I would say insert model zoom. So I say edit, scale it bigger and position it to the center. and I will just clip it to bring it inside. Okay, I come back to my page 2, and here we have inserted our side view. I would go to properties and I would say no 3D dimensions. So I would just turn off the layer for this particular section. And now I would like to give some micro detail about this finger pull shutter. So for that, I'm gonna press Ctrl and Shift, and this is the long press of Ctrl and Shift together. And with the left mouse button, I'm gonna drag it. And now you see it's grabbing the area what I selected. So I would drop it here. And once I dropped, there is a dialog here. So I can say that I want to scale it 1:3. So it's only 3 times smaller. And I would say the frame should have dotted lines. I would say no materials. And I can still double click and move this thing the way I can move any of the detail. So I would just bring it here. And now I can put some dimensions inside. So I would say vertical dimension, and I just left click on this edge. So I have this dimension. I say dimension, and I say horizontal dimension, and I just click on this edge. So I have a horizontal dimension here. Now I can choose to change the property of this particular dimension. And here I can say that the constant length will be 1. Okay. I can also choose to keep the distance between these two. So I go to dimension and I say vertical. And this time I'm going to select point to point dimension, and I will plot it here. Okay, you can choose to give some more dimension like the gaps. So I would say horizontal and horizontal between these two. So I can give a door gap too. This was a quick overview about making quick sectionings and dimensions with detailing in our plotter page itself. So this was the easy way which I like to show in demo, but to work I would prefer that I make associative sectioning. So on the top bar or in my vertical bar, you see there is associative sectioning. Now the difference is here I made all the section on the page, and in case of associative sectioning I would make all the section on my viewport. And this is what I recommend, to make the section on the viewport and then bring it on your plotter page. So let's go in the top view, and I can just say that I want to make a quick section. So I click on this associative sectioning and I say new section. So I just ignore this warning and I say that I want to make a section for this, and it has by default selected the exit view and it has taken the center of my 3D object. I can choose to change the center by changing the position. So I can say that I want the position to be -20. So I am 20 mm behind, exactly at the overhang of my top, or I can say -100. And the moment I click OK, I have the section here. Okay, so it's called section B because we already made one section with section A. Yeah, so I would just stick to section B, or you can just change the name here and you can say this is my section A. Okay, and now I'm gonna say new section, and this time I would say again this, but I would say YZ, and I would say okay, it's fine if I'm cutting it from the center, and this will be my section B. And I would just move the section text and I say new section again, and this time I'm gonna say again a front view but I would want to cut it from the center. And now if you see, you also have hatching on this. So I go to individual hatching settings and I would turn it off, because for now I don't need hatching on this small project. So I select this and I say no hatching. I say individual, select this, and no hatching for this as well. And now let's add some dimensions. So for that, you go to the horizontal menu and you click on dimension. So you can say that I would like to give some horizontal dimension, and the dimension will be here, but the arrow looks ugly with a small size. So I'm gonna go to individual dimension, change this, and I would say that here I want it to be a stroke, and the length will be 3, and please make this default. Okay, so if you notice, the sizes here are quite bigger for the dimension. But if I come on the paper and I just go on new page, and here I say insert section, and here I say add section A, and you will see the dimensions are not big enough here. I would just scale it to 1:10, and I would just bring it here. So why the dimensions are looking bigger here? The reason is because I'm using a scale at the bottom. So this scale is different than what I'm using it on the page. So on the page, it means that I want my object to be 10 times smaller. Okay, but on the viewport, it means that if my scale is 1:20, then my dimensions are 20 times bigger. 20 times bigger than what I gave the size here. So if my size is 3 mm, it's actually going 20 times bigger here, because I'm using 1:20 scale. So it's 60 mm here. It's good for having a nice visibility. Okay, and you can just change it and make it 1:10. So it's displaying the way it's gonna look on your print page. Okay, but I would keep it 1:20, so all my 2D text and dimensions are bigger. And now let's add some more dimension. So I go to dimension menu, vertical dimension, and I just click the edge of the drawer fascia, and instead of giving a dimension interactively, I would rather give the size in my input bar as 200, and I would position both the dimensions precisely at 200. I can also put a subtext here. So I would say this is drawer fascia. So I just say copy, and I would just make the same subtext here. Okay, and now let's go to the plotting page, and we'll say insert section, section B. So we have this section here, but it's not organized. So I would say scale it with the scale function, and I would just use a slider. So I can also type in here, and this is same 10 times smaller like we did earlier, and I would align this here. So if I see closely, the gap here looks quite big. So I go to dimension and I say move dimension, and I would move this dimension 100 mm inside. Yeah, and now it should look perfect. Okay. We'll add some more information to section D. So I go to dimension and I say vertical dimension. I will click one of this edge and I drop it at 100. And now I'm gonna go to properties, and here I'll give a subtext as internal height. Okay, so we go back here and I say insert section, and I would say insert section D, right click, scale, make it 10 times smaller to the original size, and double click and align it with the rest of the sections. So the sections we bought in here was by right clicking and going to insert section. Now this is not the recommended way. We have this option, we can make use of it, but I would recommend that we use a different method. Why is that? Because let's say if I am in my main menu and I want to add some custom text from the viewport, so I can go to horizontal text and I can make a horizontal text here. Let's say plume drawer. Okay, now I have placed text in one of the section, but it's showing 3 times for rest of my sections as well. So to fix this, I would recommend that instead of putting insert section, just zoom in, and I would say that I want to insert model zoom, and I can just edit the details. Also clip it from here. Now I can say properties, and I can say only 10 times smaller. So the text is actually coming from my viewport, and the advantage is that I can anytime move or edit and all of my sheets will get updated. And now the last part what we are gonna learn is making the assembly detail for the woodworking part. So let's just come in the axonometry view. When you are in top view, you see all the 2D details, but when you are in axonometry, you don't see all the 2D stuff. And now I am gonna just go to my page number 4, and I would say insert model zoom, and this time I would say properties, no material, and scaling I would say make it 10 times again. And I would also like to explode it here itself. Okay, so I explode it 200 times, and I would just correct my clipping. So I would just give some more space in vertical. And now I see a lot of unwanted parts, so I go to properties, I go to layer settings, and here I just filter out by the number of parts. So I say I don't want to see the hardware, I don't wish to see the holes, 3D text, and also for the drawer carcass I would make a separate detailing. And here I say this is okay, and this is okay. So now I just double click and move it in this area. Maybe I just change the scale to 15 times instead of 10. And now I would just place it in this area. I would now right click on this and I would say copy the detail. I right click on the open area and I say insert details here. So in this I go to properties, layers, and here I say that I want to see the drawer carcass but not the front and the back. And now I right click on this, I say edit the details, I clip it vertically to just display this area, and I keep it in this position. Okay, so what I meant to do here is add some numberings with arrows and add a part list on the right hand side. So to do that, first I need to give unique position numbering, and for that I come to main menu, I come on to attributes dialog, which we already learned, and here I go to all attributes, I go to position number, and I say that I want to give position number to my equal thickness object with this sample part. Okay, So all of my fronts and carcass is having the position number, also for my back. And I just say solid off. I say equal thickness again, so I can select my drawer carcasses too. And now I say the position number should start from, let's say, A1, A2, A3. So I say start value is 1. So it will go like 1, 2, 3 in loop until the last part. And the increment will be 1, of course. So if I say increment is 2, then each of my part will have 1, 3, 5, and it would be like odd numbers. So I would say 1 increment is okay. And I click on OK. So I have now around 20 parts I can see here, okay, until A20 from A1. So let's come to the plotter menu, and here on the vertical bar I select position number. So I say insert position number, set automatic, and here I select one of the details. So I would say this detail, and I confirm with middle mouse button. So it will give automatic position numbering. Here I can select different line, maybe a dotted one. I can say that I want circle, rectangle, or none is good. And I can give some more distance in vertical and horizontal. Okay. And I say okay. I can also choose to make the default properties to show the part name instead of position number. And I say okay. So I say set automatic again for the drawer carcass with the middle mouse button. And now here I have the names instead of the numbers. Okay, perfect. So we now need a list with this numbering and these names. So let's go to part list. And when I say part list, the system is asking which parts I want the list for. So I would say equal thickness because I'm not interested in hardware for this detail. And I select all the carcasses having same thickness, and then I say equal thickness, all the drawer bottom backs, and also my back. So I have this nice list here with the quantity. I would say insert a column in left, and here I want my position number. I press P to filter it out. Okay, so I have this position number with quantity and the part name. I can add some more information like lengths, but for now I think this is enough for the assembly. So I come back to my plotter page and I say right click, and here I say insert part list. So I have this detail which I can just scale it bigger. And this is how I can create my assembly guideline. Okay, so I can just quickly check the numbers on the left and check the part names. Of course, it would be nice to have the dimensions with the name. So I say insert column right, and here I say dimension L1 and dimension L2. And we go to the plotter again, and here I will have to just scale it. Or I can go to path list and just change the formatting from here. So I can just bring it down, maybe right click this and just change it to L, no decimals. So I have good spacing here. I say this is my width, no decimals required, and I would just reduce it. Also the position number and the quantity, and I just change the sequence of the columns as well. So now I can delete this and I say insert parts list. This looks much better. Okay, so that's all about the basic of plotting and 2D detailing. Of course, there are more functions in plotting which we are going to learn when we do the advanced tutorial, but for beginner it is good to go. And the output you see in front of your screen is the final one I completed, and you have to do the same. You can take the help from the attachment in the description, which is the final file. See you for the next time with the machining of the same cabinet. For now, goodbye and have a nice day.